Chapter 20. Catherine had taken over. During the next few days, as she waited around the house for her temperature to return to normal, Leah felt like a visitor in her own body. She was conscious. She was alert to everything that was going on, but she had no control over what she said or did. She had no voice. She could only think. She still had a will, but she could only follow. It was Catherine's body now. Leah would argue with Catherine, try to convince Catherine to leave her alone, but Catherine ignored Leah's silent pleas, as if Leah didn't exist. Sometimes, without warning, Leah would suddenly feel Catherine's presence float out from her body. These times filled Leah with hope and relief. Back in charge of her body, she felt like crying or leaping for joy, but she was always too tired and too frightened. And then, too short a while later, she would feel Catherine re-enter, taking over once again. And Leah returned to her frightening position as a silent partner in her own body. Where did Catherine go when she left Leah's body? Leah never asked. Catherine would most likely ignore her question anyway. Catherine was in charge now. Catherine was the only one allowed to ask questions. One morning when Catherine had disappeared for a short while, Leah nearly told her mother what was happening, but she stopped herself just in time. If I tell her I'm being possessed by a ghost, that a ghost is controlling my every word and act, I'll spend the rest of my life locked up in a hospital somewhere, Leah realized. So she resisted the temptation, and soon afterward Catherine returned. Maybe we can go out today, Catherine told her. Maybe we are finally strong enough to leave the house. I have some big plans for us, Leah, some very important things we must do. Leah, dreading the answer, asked what Catherine had planned, but once again her silent question was ignored. You seem to be doing fine, Leah's mother said cheerily, bursting into the room, pulling back the curtains from the twin windows, revealing a clear sunny day. Why don't you take a walk or something today? Get out of this stuffy house. Yes, Catherine yelled in Leah's voice. She kicked off the covers and climbed to her feet. Now, don't overdo it, Mrs. Carson said, pulling open the windows to let some cold, fresh air into the room. I won't, Catherine told her. It's such a pretty day. Maybe I'll just go for a short walk. Just promise you won't overdo it, Mrs. Carson said, looking concerned. You've been a pretty sick young lady. I feel great, Catherine said. When Mrs. Carson went back downstairs, Leah pulled on a pair of black denims and a maroon and gray shady-side-high sweatshirt, and then began searching the cluttered floor of Leah's closet. What are you doing? Leah asked silently. Catherine, what are you looking for? Catherine didn't reply as Leah's hands continued to search. Then, finally, mysteriously, she said, Big plans, Leah, big plans. Aha, here it is. She pulled a piece of heavy twine out of the closet, twine that had held together the last of Leah's cartons that had finally been unpacked. Catherine? What are you going to do with that? Leah demanded. You mean, what are we going to do with it? Catherine said mischievously. We are going to have a little fun. Leah had no control. Against her will, she felt herself pull the coarse twine taut, then snap it between her hands. We're going to teach Don Jacobs a little lesson, Catherine told her. Huh? Leah wasn't sure she had heard correctly. Don? He and Marcy were real close, right? Catherine asked, but it wasn't a question. I heard everything, Leah. I heard you telling everything to Dina on the phone. I was in your bedroom all the time, remember? But Don, Leah started. Don needs to be taught a lesson too, Catherine said coldly. Come on, let's go, Leah. Let's see what you can do. Chapter 21. Don lived in a square red brick house on Canyon Road. Someone must have spent the entire morning raking leaves, Leah realized. An enormous leaf pile stood in the middle of the small front yard. What a beautiful walk we've had, Catherine said silently to Leah. The air, it smells so fresh and sweet. I think autumn is my favorite time of year. Leah responded with glum silence. She had argued with Catherine the entire way over to Don's house, trying to stop her from carrying out whatever horrid plans she had for Don. But I'm doing it for you, dear, was Catherine's only reply, and then she chose to ignore Leah entirely. When they had reached Don's block, Leah made one last desperate effort to regain control of her body. She concentrated on driving Catherine away, on making her legs stop. But Leah was too weak. Catherine was firmly in charge. Despite Leah's efforts, her legs kept moving. She continued walking briskly over the leaf-strewn sidewalks toward Canyon Drive and Don's house. It's no use trying to resist, Catherine told her as they walked up the asphalt drive. I'm doing this for you. Don was such a little slave to Marcy. He never stood up for you. Catherine, please, Leah begged. But she was ringing the doorbell. Please don't be home, Leah thought. Please don't be home. Footsteps inside. The white front door was pulled open. Don stood in the doorway, a startled look on his face. Leah. Hi, Don, Catherine said in Leah's voice. How are you? Leah, how are you? Don asked, holding open the storm door. I heard you were sick. I'm okay now. She stepped into the small entranceway. The house smelled of roasting chicken. She could hear heavy metal music blaring from somewhere upstairs. What a surprise, Don said, wiping his hands on his sweatshirt. I just finished raking leaves. Some guys are coming over, and... I'll only stay a minute, she said. I wanted to see how you were doing. I mean, you must have been pretty broken up. About Marcy. Don lowered his head, averting his eyes. Yeah, he muttered. The room was silent for a moment, except for the music from upstairs. It was pretty tough, he said finally, still avoiding her glance. Such a shock. I mean, such a stupid accident. It was unbelievable. Yes, unbelievable, she repeated softly. Leah listened helplessly as the conversation continued. Catherine speaking so sympathetically to Don. Poor, unsuspecting Don. If only there was something I could do, Leah thought desperately. Some way to stop Catherine. But Leah was helpless, a helpless bystander. You were there, Don said. It must have been horrible for you. They were still standing awkwardly in the entranceway. Don had his hands jammed into his jeans pockets. Yes, it was, she said softly, shaking her head. I don't think I'll ever get over it. I feel really alone now, Don confessed, raising one hand to scratch the top of his curly brown hair. Well, you shouldn't feel alone, Leah said meaningfully. Don stared back at her for a long moment. Then his mouth dropped open as he suddenly remembered something. The chicken! My mom went out. I promised her I'd turn off the oven. He turned and hurried to the kitchen. As soon as he was out of sight, Leah reached into her jeans pocket and pulled out the length of twine. She held it between her hands, untangling it. Catherine, what are you going to do? Leah demanded. No reply. Leah felt her body begin walking toward the kitchen. Catherine, stop. What are you going to do? No reply. Walking silently, Leah crept into the kitchen. She stepped quickly behind Don, who had his back turned. He was bending over the open oven. She pulled the rope taut and began to raise it over Don's head. With a silent gasp of horror, Leah realized that she was about to strangle Don. Chapter 22. Leah leaned forward until she was almost on Don's back, raising the twine over his head, ready to pull it around his neck and choke him with it. The doorbell rang. Don stood up straight. Leah backed away quickly, letting go of the twine, letting it fall to the floor. Hey! Don cried, spinning around. I didn't hear you come in here. Sorry, Leah said. That was a close one, Leah, helpless in her own body, thought, greatly relieved. And then, shaken with fear, she realized that Catherine hadn't been defeated, only delayed. She would try again, and Leah would be a murderer, a true murderer. Don turned off the oven and ran to the front door. Leah stopped to retrieve the twine, jamming it hurriedly into the pocket of her jeans, then followed Don to the front door. Hi, guys, Don was saying. I'm all ready. Just have to get my keys. Two boys Leah recognized from school, Corey Brooks and Gary Brandt, strode into the house. They were both wearing jeans and Shadyside High leather jackets. Hey, you know Leah? Don asked, heading into the living room. Leah Carson, this is Corey and Gary, he called out. Hi, Leah said shyly. How you doing? Corey asked. I've seen you at school, Gary said. Are you in Hunter's chemistry class? Yeah, Leah said. I just started a few weeks ago. Okay, let's go, Don said, reappearing. He had brushed his hair in a few seconds he'd been gone. Can we give you a lift anywhere, Leah? No thanks, Leah said. I'm going to walk. She started out the front door. See you soon, Don. Take care. I don't believe this, Leah thought. First Catherine tries to strangle him, then she tells him to take care. Nice meeting you guys, Leah called back to Gary and Corey, and then started to jog down the driveway, past their car, a beaten-up Ford Fiesta with radio station bumper stickers pasted all over the back, and down Canyon Road, jogging against the wind, cold and fragrant on her burning hot face. Did you have a nice walk, dear? Mrs. Carson asked, hearing Leah return. So this is a typo because it says, Very pleasant, Catherine repeated in Leah's voice. I'm beginning to feel so much better, Mom. Oh, I'm so glad, Mrs. Carson said, entering the room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I'm really sorry, Leah said. You know, about the ghost stuff, the crazy things I said. I must have really worried you, Mom. Listening to this, helpless to interfere, Leah uttered a silent plea. It isn't me, Mom. It isn't me saying those words. Please, Mom, can't you tell? Can't you tell that it isn't me? Your dad and I were a little worried. You were obviously having some sort of hallucination from the high fever, Leah, Mrs. Carson said. Well, I feel really good now, Leah said cheerily, like my old self. She started up the stairs to her room. Catherine, you can't do this to me, Leah cried, a silent, desperate plea. He'll die next time, Catherine muttered in a dark, terrifying voice to Leah. Don will die, and so will his stupid, grinning friends. They'll die too. They'll all die. The blackness seemed to part, and behind it lay more blackness. Then 2 rectangles of gray came into focus, the 2 windows across the room. Leah sat up as the swirling shades of black lifted and her room settled into place. She felt strange, unsettled. Catherine? She whispered. No reply. And then Leah realized Catherine had left her body again. Catherine? Leah had no idea how long Catherine would be gone. Sometimes it was for a few hours, sometimes for only minutes. Where does she go? Leah wondered. She spun around in her silky white pajamas and put her feet on the floor. I'm moving, she thought. I'm moving my legs, my body. I'm doing the thinking. I'm in control. It felt so good, if only for a short while. I've got to do something, Leah thought. I've got to get rid of Catherine before she kills Don. But how? What can I do? She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, suddenly feeling very alone. I have no one, she thought miserably. There's no one I can tell, no one I can turn to. If I tell my parents, they'll call the doctor, and I'll be in bed for the rest of my life. If I tell Dina, well, she wouldn't believe me either. No one would believe me. I'm all alone, and I've got to deal with Catherine on my own. But how? And then she had an idea. The locked-up room, the boarded-up room in the attic. The secret must be up there, Leah decided. Why else would Catherine be so desperate to keep me away from it? Why would she pull all those tricks, give me visions to make me think that I was in that room, do everything she could to keep me out of it? Leah remembered Catherine saying that she had boarded up the room herself, that she had wanted it to stay boarded up forever. Why? There was something in that room that Catherine didn't want to let out. A secret, a frightening secret to Catherine. I have to know what it is, Leah decided, climbing to her feet. I have to find out what's behind the locked attic door. Chapter 23. The attic was still and cold, the air thick and hard to breathe. Leah nearly choked on the sour, stale dust that invaded her nostrils. She clicked on the attic light and moved quickly, her rubber thongs padding over the creaking floorboards, to the boarded-up door. When will Catherine be back, she wondered, the thought sending a chill down her back. Catherine? She called. No reply. When will she be back? I've got to hurry. I've got to learn the secret of this room before Catherine returns, before she can stop me, before she can invade my body again. Without hesitating any longer, she grabbed the highest 2x4 and tugged. It didn't budge. She tugged again. It was securely nailed. The boards came off so easily before, she recalled, but that, of course, was just a vision, just a dream. A hammer. She needed a hammer. But was there time? Leah had no choice. Down the ladder, then down the stairs. She crept through the dark, silent house to the back, her eyes adjusting to the dim light, the familiar objects around her, strange and mysterious in shades of black. It took a while to find her father's tool chest, and a while longer to rummage through it in the dark, quietly, oh so quietly, to find the claw-headed hammer. Then back up to the attic. Catherine, where was she? About to return? About to pounce? About to stop Leah before she could learn the hidden room's secret, the only secret that could possibly save her? Back into the attic, the choking sourness of the dust. And now she was pulling frantically at the boards, wedging the hammer between the door frame and the board, pushing and prying with all her strength. Frantic motions, desperate motions, so frightened, listening for any sound, watching for any clue that Catherine might be returning. The first board groaned as if in protest and fell to the floor. She started on the second one, breathing hard, coughing on the thick, dusty air, listening, waiting, every pore on edge, every pore alert as she feverishly worked the hammer, prying loose that board too. The second board fell with a soft thud, kicking up dust as it landed. One board to go, and then she could pull open the door. Catherine? No reply. Still not there. Maybe there was time. Maybe Leah could do it. The third board resisted her efforts. She wedged the hammer in and pulled. It squeaked and groaned but didn't move. She was bathed in sweat now, cold, uncomfortable sweat, but she continued to work feverishly, until the third board came off and fell at her feet. She was reaching to turn the key in the door lock when a voice cried out right beside her. Leah, what are you doing? Catherine was hovering beside Leah, her eyes glowing red with fury, her tiny features twisted in anger, her golden ringlets flying wildly about her head. What are you doing? Get away from that door! Leah ignored her and reached for the key. But with astounding strength, Catherine grabbed Leah by the shoulders and pulled her back. No, Leah screamed. You can't stop me. She ducked, pulled out of Catherine's cold grip, and stumbled forward to the door. Then she grabbed the key and started to turn it. But Catherine moved quickly. She floated above Leah, then vanished. And Leah felt the pressure on the top of her head, felt Catherine begin her invasion, felt the weight begin to descend. Leaning against a locked door, Leah jammed her eyes shut and concentrated. I shut her out once. I can do it again. I just have to be strong, strong, strong. But the pressure built until her head felt about to explode. Catherine was pushing her way in, determined to stop Leah, determined to take control once again. No, 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 no. Leah concentrated on keeping the ghost out. The weight began to lift. The pressure lightened. Yes! She had done it. Don't open the door! Catherine, invisible, shrieked from somewhere outside of Leah. Don't! I've shut her out, Leah thought, her heart pounding. I've shut her out. Leah, don't! She turned the key and pulled open the door. She peered inside the room, raised her open hands to her face, and started to scream. Chapter 24. The bedroom was revealed much as Leah had imagined it. The dark walls, the flickering candles, the canopy bed. But sitting on the bed were a man and a woman, or, as Leah observed them now, the horrible remains of a man and a woman. They were dressed entirely in black, which made them difficult to see in the shadowy light. The woman wore a long, flowing high-necked dress, he a dark suit and white shirt with a stiff collar. The clothes appeared to be in good condition and clean, but hung in folds on them, many sizes too big. Staring into the dark room, Leah quickly saw the reason. Their bodies had begun decomposing, revealing their skeletons beneath. Fleshless hands with stick-like bony fingers hung out from the ends of their sleeves. Their faces were skeletal too, locked in hideous, open-jawed grins. Tiny pockets of green, decaying flesh still clung in the crevices of their skulls. The man had one eye in place, the other a deep, empty socket. The woman had no face at all. Strands of spidery black hair snaked down from the top of her yellowing skull bone. A huge black worm crawled out of an eye socket and dropped down the front of her blouse. As Leah started to scream, both skeletal figures leapt to their feet, bones rattling as they stood. They staggered toward the door, toward Leah, their bony hands outstretched. Leah screamed again, and felt Catherine slip into her body. Distracted by the gruesome figures advancing on her, Leah had lost her concentration just long enough for Catherine to get in. And now she felt the heaviness, felt the weight of Catherine sinking through her, helpless once again. Catherine in control now. You fool! Catherine shouted angrily. You fool! The two skeletons rattled closer, stumbling over their ill-fitting clothes, their hands outstretched, both pointing long, accusing fingers. I warned you not to open the door, Catherine cried. Those are my parents. So there you are, evil child, whispered the woman, the sound that of dry, rushing wind. Stay back, ghouls, Catherine screamed in Leah's voice, but the skeletons moved with surprising agility. The man's hand snapped out, and his dry, bony fingers wrapped themselves like snakes around Leah's throat. Chapter 25. Evil child, the woman cried, her voice whistling through her open throat. Leah gagged as the man's fingers tightened around her throat. She couldn't breathe through her nose because the foul odor of decaying flesh choked her. She tried to pull away from the hideous, grinning skulls with their dark, cavernous eye sockets, but both of them had hold of her now. Their cadaverous arms wrapped around her, smothering her in darkness. choking her with the sour smell of the dead, laughing triumphantly, dry huffs of silent laughter blowing through their open jaws. They're going to swallow me up, Leah thought. They're going to make me like them. And as she thought this, and as she surrendered to the hard, bony forms that were attempting to smother her, Leah felt Catherine float away. I'm going to die now, Leah thought, but Catherine will not die with me. Her parents are going to kill me now, and Catherine will survive. Leah began to see flashes of red, swirls of red, glowing brighter and brighter as the skeletons hugged her, choked off her breath, and wrapped themselves around her. And then she saw Catherine beside her, her eyes glowing red as fire, her mouth twisted in anger, pointing an accusing finger at Leah's attackers. They murdered me once, Catherine screamed. Now they want to murder me again. You evil liar, the woman shrieked in brittle fury. The skeletal figures relaxed their death grip on Leah. Leah uttered a low cry and sank to her knees, frantically sucking air. You evil liar, the woman repeated, turning her yellowed eyeless skull on Catherine. You murdered us both and locked us forever in this room. But we have waited here all these years for you. We vowed not to rest until we stopped your evil. Her eyes glowing even brighter, Catherine tossed back her head and started to laugh. But her laughter was cut short as both her parents leapt at her, bones clattering. They circled her with their putrid, baggy clothes, the odor rising in a vapor of decay, parts of them dropping off, bones falling to the floor as they swept around her. Catherine disappeared inside this foul, murderous hug. As Leah gaped in frozen horror, the vengeful ghouls hugged their daughter, wrapping her tighter and tighter in a furious, swirling grip, suffocating her. Help me! Please, help me! Catherine cried out to Leah. Catherine's pale hand reached out from the smothering embrace of her parents, but a skeletal hand grabbed Catherine's hand and, with a violent jerk, twisted the hand off and tossed it to the floor. Catherine and Leah screamed at the same time. Leah covered her ears and shut her eyes. But she couldn't shut out Catherine's final scream, the scream of an animal caught in a death trap. When the scream faded away, Leah opened her eyes. As she stared in open-mouthed horror, all three ghostly figures melted together in a glowing, malodorous ball of flame, which slowly vanished in a choking cloud of yellow, sulphurous smoke. Sobbing in terror, still struggling to catch her breath, Leah stared at the thick yellow vapor as it rose to the attic ceiling. Everything went red, and then black. She could feel herself sinking to the floor, but she couldn't do anything about it. Chapter 26. When she opened her eyes, she saw only white. Is this heaven? She wondered. It took Leah a while to realize that she was staring up at a ceiling, and then her mother's face hovered into view. Leah, are you awake? Her mother had tears in the corners of her eyes, and her chin trembled as she stared down at Leah. Are you awake? Her mother repeated. And then, from somewhere nearby, Leah heard the voice of her father. Stand back a little. Give her room to breathe. I'm alive? Leah asked, confused. She felt weak. Of course you're alive, dear, her mother said, wiping the tears with her finger. Leah realized she was lying on her back. She looked down and saw that she was in an unfamiliar bed, covered with a sheet and a light blue blanket. Where am I? Shadyside General, her father said, moving closer. You've been very sick, Leah. I have? You've had such a high temperature. It was 106 for 3 days, Mrs. Carson said, her voice quavering. How long have I been here? Leah asked, closing her eyes. The bright lights reflecting off the shiny white ceiling were hurting her eyes. Nearly a week, her father said softly, and then quickly added, But you're going to be okay. You mean it was all just a dream? Leah asked, opening her eyes, turning her head toward her parents. Her head throbbed when she moved it. A dream? Mrs. Carson was obviously confused. Did you have a lot of dreams? Mr. Carson asked. Sometimes, when you have a high fever, you get very vivid and unusual dreams. They're called fever dreams. It was all a fever dream? Leah asked. She tried to sit up, but her entire body protested, and she groaned and sank back onto the pillow. You're going to be okay, Mr. Carson repeated. You're just weak from being in bed so long. You'll be home in no time, Mrs. Carson told her. And Dina says she's been organizing all your homework so you'll be able to catch up. Oh, great, Leah moaned. Thanks a bunch, Dina. Mr. Carson laughed. Sounds like you're already back to normal. A boy has been calling for you every day, her mother said. Don Jacobs. He sounded very worried about you. Leah smiled. It was so hard to concentrate. I can't believe it was all a dream, she said, drifting back to sleep. Leah's first thought upon returning home 3 days later was to climb up to the attic and check the secret room. But her parents insisted that she stay in bed a few more days, and they kept a close and constant watch on her. She couldn't sneak up there. Finally, she couldn't wait any longer. Awakening early on a Saturday morning before either of her parents had stirred, she crept out of bed, pulled on a robe and her rubber thongs, and made her way silently up to the attic. Pale morning light filtered in through the circular window. The floorboards creaked as always beneath her silent tread. Sure enough, the hidden bedroom was locked and boarded up still. All a dream, Leah thought. She stood there in silence for a while, trying to sort out her feelings. She couldn't decide if she was relieved or disappointed. Still feeling shaky, she turned away from the hidden room and climbed back down to her bedroom. On the way back to bed, she passed the oval mirror above her dresser and took a peek at herself. I really need a haircut, she told herself. My bangs are down over my eyes. I look like some kind of mangy sheepdog. And then something beside the dresser lamp caught her eye. A black ribbon. Leah picked it up with a trembling hand. She knew immediately what it was. It was Catherine's black velvet hair ribbon. She held it tightly in one hand, running the fingers of the other hand over the smooth velvet. Catherine and her evil had been real after all, and the room above Leah's bedroom had held Catherine's parents, waiting patiently for 100 years to get their revenge on their daughter. Staring at the ribbon, Leah felt a stab of renewed horror. Marcy! Poor Marcy, she thought. Marcy had been the final victim of Catherine's evil, and Leah had been partly to blame. Feelings of regret flooded over Leah, regret and sadness. She knew this was a feeling she would have to live with for a long, long time. Leah toyed with the ribbon, tying it and untying it around her hand. Should she tell anyone where the ribbon came from? No, she decided. The secret bedroom must remain a secret. Another secret of Fear Street, a street of secrets. She put down the ribbon and made her way downstairs to fix some breakfast. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of The Secret Bedroom by R.L. Stine, a Fear Street novel, Book 13. Hi, this is Chris again with Nightfall Audiobooks. That about does it for The Secret Bedroom. Holy cow, what a book! This book was difficult to read because of how long all these chapters were. It took 10 to 15 minutes per chapter to sit down to read this book correctly. I think this is one of the first times where the cover actually matches what happens in the story. There really is a skeleton behind a door trying to get to somebody. It's great. Wow. So there's ghosts, there's possession, there's zombies. This is a good story. This was fun. My studio is in my basement, underneath my kitchen, and that's where I do all of my recording for this show. And sometimes I record late at night. And a few of these chapters, I'm getting chills in the middle of the night, and I'm like, I want to keep on going, but I kind of want to stop, because one, it's getting late, and two, it's getting a little scary. I haven't had a Fear Street novel creep me out like this in well over 20 years. I don't think since I've read Bad Moonlight has a Fear Street novel affected me so strongly. This is a classic novel. If you want to get involved with Fear Street and start reading, and you want like a top 10, The Secret Bedroom's on that list. The characterizations were good. Dina Martinson and Jade Smith were back from the Wrong Number series. That was fun. Marcy was a total pain. She didn't have it coming, though. I mean, yeah, she's telling lies and stuff about somebody around school, but that doesn't mean she deserves to die. That just means she needs an attitude adjustment, and she needs someone to talk to her. Catherine went completely over the deep end and killed her. That was something. I didn't see that coming. I thought there'd just be a bunch of scares and then she would leave. And then at that little bit at the end there where Catherine was going to try to kill Don, I thought that was it too. I was like, wow, okay. Here comes like the late game D plot. We're going to try to go ahead and kill Don now and all of his friends. I'm glad that didn't come to fruition. So anyway, this was fun. Highly, highly recommended. Thank you very much for listening. If you want to get in touch with me, you can write me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. That's probably the only way you can get in touch with me to get an inside look on what's happening next with Nightfall Audiobooks. I'm also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I love hearing what you have to say. All criticisms and feedback are wonderful. Please give me your thoughts and tell me what you're thinking about the show. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.